Let's learn all about my new faded shawl design called Faded Undulation and see how we can make beautiful melted color palettes for this shawl. The Faded Undulation shawl uses 5 colors of fingering weight yarn, so it's great for all those 5-skein speckled fades or semi-solid melted combinations. It begins really small with the I-cord cast on, and you might see that the shape is a little familiar if you've done the painting waves shawl, the painting waves with all those stripy undulating waves. This is that same beautiful triangle shape, but with a faded color palette in garter stitch. I just love the mix of the melted colors with those wavy wiggling lines. It just makes, I think it makes it a bit more blendy when you have the curvy lines versus when you're fading fabrics with really straight lines. It gives a little bit more of that mixed interlocking texture when you change from one color to the other. So this is one of our kits that we put together from Walk Collection in the greens, and I'm wearing one of our other color palettes in the browns for you neutral lovers. And I had some leftovers from this shawl. So these were my leftover little yarn nuggets from the green sample. And from lightest to darkest, the colors were Bel Air for the lightest color. I usually start light with my faded designs because it's also easier to see those cast-on details when you work with a lighter color. You could go dark to light, but whenever you're starting a project, I think it's easier to see the techniques and the stitches using the light. Bel Air. So it's a variegated color with cream, a silver gray, and it brings in the minty colorway that I exaggerated throughout with the other colors. So Bel Air, and then Cliff Jump was the next color. This was same kind of gray mix, but then that minty color became a little more of a seafoam turquoise green. Bel Air, Cliff Jump, Great Barrier Reef is a really fun variegated with green and turquoise and a bit more brown. And then Caribbean is a bit more saturated, focusing on the blues. And then I ended it with Treasure Island, this really deep sea blue. So those were the 5 colors from light to dark. And I always leave a little bit of leftovers when I'm doing my faded color palettes, just so you don't run out of yarn in the middle of a row. So if you're not sure if you have enough yarn to finish a row or to finish 2 rows, then just stop early and switch to the next color using the next color on its own. So whenever you're fading colors for the Faded Undulation, you're going to want to start with one color on its own and use it until you have about maybe 20 or 25 grams left over of that first color. And then the pattern says to stripe colors A and B for 2 rows each. So you're going to do 2 rows of A, 2 rows of B, 2 rows of A, 2 rows of B, carrying your yarn along the edge until you run out of color A or until you want to stop. I also like saving these little nuggets to put in other projects later. So don't feel like you have to use every little meter of your yarn. Just stop a little early to make sure you don't run out in the middle of a row. And then once you're done with color A, work with color B on its own until, again, you have about maybe 20 to 30 grams left over of color B. There's no right or wrong way. And then you just continue fading your colors in that fashion. So when color B is out, you'll use color C on its own, and then stripe C and D together for 2 rows each. And then when color C, when you're done with that, use color D on its own, D and E striped together, and finish with color E. So that gives that interlocked striped sequence. And the best way to get those really smooth fades in your shawl are to put colors next to each other that have similarities. So I wouldn't transition from this one all the way to this one because there's not much light gray or cream in this skein. And that minty color, yeah, everything is darker in this. So you need some bridge colors, some connecting colors to fill in the gaps. So some dyers dye colors specifically to fade, so you can find the exact tones from one color to the next, but a little bit more saturated. But you can do that with your stash by focusing on colors from light to dark. So don't worry about your colors matching exactly from color A to color B, but just think more about the saturation or some similarities. Like, is my color B a little bit darker than color A? Yes, and that contrast is going to help connect the colors. And even if the colors don't exactly match, like this one's more minty and this one's more turquoise, just say yes, don't stress. As long as it's about that saturation and that contrast slowly increasing in value, then you're going to get a nice connection. One other thing to look at when you're choosing yarns for these faded color palettes, do you see all these yarns? They're kind of variegated or speckled, where every color has a light highlight to it and a dark shadow to it. Those types of yarns blend really nice together because even if the colors don't match exactly, the light parts of the yarn are going to blend together a bit. And the dark shadowy parts of the yarns are also going to match and blend throughout the fabric. So I would say don't stress out too much about the colors being exactly the same throughout the shawl, but about the contrast. And I can't even see where one color ends and where one color begins. This is definitely color A, the lightest one at the beginning. Somewhere in here was when the striping happened. Maybe you're right, I can't even tell. It's either here or down here, but you can't tell because it's 2 rows of each color. The colors are so close together that the mind makes this illusion of the colors just blending to make a new color. So that's the best part about these faded shawls, is when you can't really see that beginning or end of a color. But it happens somewhere in there, and then color B is on its own, I don't know, somewhere around here maybe, and then color B and C, I think down here. So another key, especially when you can't tell where one color ends and where one color begins, don't stress about your color changes being the exact width as your other color changes. So that means like when colors B and C are striped together, let's say you do 8 stripes of each color when you're changing your yarns. Colors B and C striped together for 8 stripes each. You don't have to do 8 stripes each for your next color change. So I always just eyeball it, and when I'm happy with the transition, I stop the old color and keep going with the new color. So maybe one transition that's striped is about this wide, but then maybe one of your other striped transitions is just a baby transition. Maybe you only do 4 stripes of each color. So that's okay. That's what I do. I just go with the flow and feel those color changes, and just, if I have more yarn, I'll do some more stripes. Or if I'm done with the old color, just break it and go on with the new. But how seamless is that? I just love that connecting color series. So the Faded Undulation is a triangle shawl with the increase on one edge. You'll be doing the garter stitch and little eyelets, so it's really, really easy. If you just follow the rows written as you go, it gets real comfortable as you repeat the pattern, and you get more and more of those little eyelets. This is the beautiful brown, kind of a gray-brown color story for Faded Undulation. So with these big triangle shapes, I like putting that big end on one shoulder, and then you can toss the little end around and see all the colors cascade together. So I hope you have fun putting colors together for this Faded Undulation shawl. We've got a handful of kits at Stephen and Penelope that I put together to perfectly blend and melt for your shawl, or you could dive in and get all those single skeins from your stash and make a leftover faded palette. So just remember to focus on your colors from light to dark. Don't worry too much about the exact colors that you're working with, but maybe you could make a seafoam blue-green palette. But get all your colors out and see where the contrast takes you, and have fun mixing all your yarns together. It's fingering weight, so it's a lot of good options there for you, and I can't wait to see what you make. So you can download this pattern on Ravelry and Westknits.com, and we'll have a lot more fun knitting these garter stitch faded creations. See you in the next one.